Some major breaking news just into us with former President Donald Trump now facing new charges in the special counsel's investigation into those classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago. We are getting some significant new information from what's being called a superseding indictment, essentially additional information that the special counsel's office is now revealing. And it is new insight here into what specifically is being alleged related to what you just heard Laura and Lester and Danny and our team talking about. And that is the allegation that Carlos de Oliveira, identified as a property manager, a kind of maintenance worker at Mar-a-Lago, along with Walt Nada, Mr. Trump's body man, and Mr. Trump himself, tried to delete surveillance footage at Mar-a-Lago in the summer of 2022. I want to bring in NBC News correspondent Tom Winter, who's covering this, and our NBC News legal analyst, Kristen Kibben-Feddens. And Tom, I want to share with our audience something that is revealed in this indictment. This indictment alleges that Carlos de Oliveira talk to a different Trump employee.
Hey, gang, it's John straight into it today. Trump's inner circle is turning on him, not quietly, but by actively cooperating with federal prosecutors. While the media focuses on policy debates, the real dangerous drama is unfolding behind closed doors. The walls are closing in. They're handing over documents. They're testifying under oath. And this isn't some low-level staffer who barely knew the president. We're talking about individuals who were physically present at Mar-a-Lago during the classified documents saga. People who saw what happened, who moved boxes, who knew where the secrets were stored. And now they're telling the government everything they know. The betrayal is staggering, but what's even more shocking is how little attention this is getting compared to the daily political noise. People are so distracted by the surface-level controversies.
After telling this employee, and this is that their conversation should remain just between the two of them, that, and I'm quoting here, that, quote unquote, the boss wanted the server deleted. This employee responded he wouldn't know how to do that. He didn't think he would have the rights to do that. That employee said, you're going to have to reach out to somebody else, essentially. And then de Oliveira then, I'm quoting, de Oliveira then insisted to this other employee that the boss wanted the server deleted and asked, what are we going to do? And that is just a piece of the indictment, Tom, that is describing part of this new information that we're just learning this evening.
Yeah, it is really stunning behavior here. And it's not just de Oliveira and Nada that are tied up in this. De Oliveira is being charged alongside the former president. And they specifically say that Trump was involved in this effort to delete this particular server. To your point, Hallie, apparently this occurred on June 27th at 9:48 a.m. De Oliveira walked into the IT office where an unnamed Trump employee was working with somebody in the IT department. De Oliveira.
That they're completely missing the earthquake happening underneath Trump's entire political operation. The foundation of loyalty that has sustained him through every scandal, every investigation, every political firestorm is cracking apart in real time. And once that foundation crumbles, everything else falls with it. Let me take you inside this unfolding nightmare for Trump's administration. Because once you understand the details, you'll realize this is far more serious than anything you've seen reported on the evening news. Let's start with the star witness, the man who has flipped the entire narrative on its head. His name is Taveras, and his story is absolutely astonishing. This guy started out as Trump's valet in the White House, the person responsible for bringing the president his Diet Cokes, handling his personal items, being by his side throughout the day. That's how close he was to Trump. That's how much access he had. He was there in the West Wing, witnessing things that most people could only imagine.
Requested that he step away. They went into some sort of an audio closet, and once inside that space, he told them that the conversation needed to stay between the two of them, and that the boss, as you said, wanted the server deleted, and that's believed to be the surveillance camera video. That's according to other sections of this charging document. So it's clear here, and the special counsel says, we're looking at it on screen right now, the back and forth that's contained in these allegations. It's clear here that this occurred shortly after a subpoena was served for this video. This is very damning evidence, Hallie. And looking at this, if there was not such a threat of the clock, if you will, and we were just listening to our colleague Laura Jarrett talk about it, the idea that there's an effort to get this trial moving because of the election deadline in 2024. If you were looking at this and it didn't involve Donald Trump, it involved three people we hadn't heard about before, I think they would be saying uncle at this point, because the level of detail and evidence that they have.
And when Trump left office, Taveras didn't go back to a normal job. He followed Trump to Mar-a-Lago. He became part of the inner circle down there. He was handling documents. He was moving boxes. He was seeing things that the government would desperately want to know about. And at first, when investigators started asking questions, Taveras told one version of events. He went along with whatever Trump's team wanted him to say. But then something changed. The pressure from federal prosecutors intensified. The possibility of facing criminal charges became very real. And Taveras made a calculation that would change everything. He retracted his original testimony completely. He decided to cooperate fully with prosecutors. He handed over documents. He gave detailed testimony about what he had seen and what he had been asked to do.
Appears to be growing stronger by the day. And the question now is whether De Oliveira and Nauta decide that their lives would be better working with the special counsel's office than being charged by it. I'm not somebody, and you know this over the last 8-9 years that we've talked and worked together, I'm not somebody who's always focused on, who's going to flip, who's going to cooperate. But I think in this particular instance, you're looking at somebody who might be motivated, and it's clear that they have other people that are talking to them. That's the special counsel's office. It's clear they have other people relaying these conversations, and they're putting a lot of weight on them here. These are pretty significant additional charges to this case.
There's also a sort of an intriguing breadcrumb that is dropped in this indictment, and I haven't finished the whole thing as we've been live on the air, Tom, but on June 23rd last summer in the evening, this indictment specifically states that Donald Trump then called Carlos de Oliveira, they say 8:45 at night, and they spoke for about a half an hour. That is roughly 4 days before this conversation.
And what he revealed was explosive. According to prosecutors, Taveras allegedly participated in a plot to delete surveillance video from Mar-a-Lago, security camera footage that the government desperately wanted to see, footage that apparently showed people moving boxes of classified documents around the property. And Taveras didn't just tell them about this plot. He explained who was involved. He described how it happened. He handed over exactly the kind of evidence that prosecutors need to build a case. Now, think about what it means when someone like Taveras decides to flip. This isn't some outsider who had a brief interaction with Trump. This is someone who was inside the operation, someone who witnessed countless private conversations.
Inside, as you described, the sort of quiet, private conversation that De Oliveira wanted to have with another employee about the boss wanting the server to be deleted. It seems as though the special counsel, the prosecutors here, are trying to draw a linkage, right? Throw down some breadcrumbs, pull that needle, thread that through.
Oh, 100%. And they clearly have De Oliveira's phone records because they have records of Trump calling De Oliveira at 3:55 on the date of, I just want to make sure I'm accurate here, on June 27th. So they have the phone conversations between Trump and De Oliveira. And so I think that that's significant that they had that level of a phone conversation, again, putting more links on the idea of De Oliveira doing this for Trump, according to their allegations.
Someone who saw how Trump handled classified materials day after day. And when he decided to cooperate, he didn't just give prosecutors a few scattered details. He gave them the keys to the kingdom. According to court documents, the government has now collected over 800,000 pages of evidence in this case. Let me put that number in perspective for you. That's more than most libraries hold in their entire collections. That's a mountain of documents, emails, grand jury transcripts, surveillance footage, and witness statements. And out of that massive trove, prosecutors have flagged 4,500 key documents that they consider the most important pieces of evidence. Those are the smoking guns. Those are the emails where people discussed moving classified materials. Those are the videos showing boxes being transported from one room to another. Those are the witness statements that directly contradict the version of events that Trump and his team have been telling the public. And here's the thing. Trump's defense team has had access to all of this evidence since the summer of 2023. They've known exactly what the government has, they've seen the witness statements, they've watched the surveillance footage, and yet, going into 2025, this case is still in pretrial mode, still not resolved, still hanging over Trump's presidency like a dark cloud. That should tell you something about how serious the evidence is. If the defense had clear answers, if they could easily explain away all of this, the case would have been dismissed long ago. Instead, it keeps dragging on, getting messier and more complicated with each passing month. But Taveras isn't the only one who's flipped. There's also Carlos Garcia de Baz, another witness who initially gave one version of events and then changed his story under pressure from prosecutors. When you have multiple witnesses changing their testimony in the same direction, that creates a pattern that juries find very compelling. Prosecutors can stand up in court and say, look at this pattern. Multiple people who were close to Trump, multiple people who had access to classified documents, multiple people who initially tried to protect him are now telling us the same thing. This is what happened. This is what they saw. This is what they were asked to do. And that pattern is devastating to a defense case, because it shows that it's not just one disgruntled employee making accusations. It shows that there's a consistent narrative emerging from multiple sources, all pointing in the same direction. Now, let's talk about the legal mechanics of all this, because it matters for understanding just how much trouble Trump is in. When prosecutors bring a case like this, they don't just rely on witness testimony. They collect physical evidence. They get surveillance footage. They obtain financial records. They subpoena emails and text messages. They build an overwhelming case designed to leave no room for reasonable doubt. And in this case, they've been gathering evidence for years. The surveillance footage alone, the footage that Taveras allegedly helped plot to delete, is a huge problem for Trump. Because if that footage showed him personally handling classified materials, if it showed him directing others to move boxes around, if it showed him involved in obstruction, that's extremely damaging. It's not just testimony from someone with an axe to grind. It's visual evidence that can't be explained away. And when you combine that surveillance footage with witness testimony from someone like Taveras, someone who was literally in the room, you get a case that's very difficult to defend against. The scale of the evidence is absolutely staggering. Prosecutors have accumulated over 833,000 pages of material. 833,000. I'm going to say that again because it bears repeating. 833,000 pages of evidence. Just imagine the physical space that would occupy. Imagine rooms filled with bankers' boxes, stacked floor to ceiling, containing every email, every text message, every financial record, every witness statement that the government could get its hands on. Out of that enormous trove, prosecutors identified 4,500 documents as particularly significant, the key pieces that form the backbone of their case. And Trump's legal team received all of this in June of 2023. That means they've had well over a year to review every single page, to prepare their defense, to identify weaknesses in the government's case. And yet, here we are in 2025, and the case still hasn't gone to trial. That's not normal. Usually when the defense has a strong case, they push for a speedy trial. They want to get in front of a jury as quickly as possible before the government can build even more momentum. But in this case, the defense has been fighting pretrial motions, raising procedural objections, trying to get the case thrown out on technical grounds. That doesn't suggest confidence. That suggests a defense team that's trying to delay the inevitable as long as possible. And then there's the issue of loyalty. Loyalty is the currency that runs through Trump's entire political operation. From the moment he entered politics, Trump demanded absolute, unquestioning loyalty from everyone around him. You're either with him or you're against him. There's no middle ground, no room for nuance. And for years, that strategy worked remarkably well. People stayed loyal, they defended him publicly, they remained in his orbit. They benefited from their association with him. But now we're seeing loyalty tested in the most extreme way imaginable. Federal prosecutors with vast resources, unlimited subpoena power, and the ability to bring criminal charges against anyone who lies to them. That's pressure on a scale that loyalty can't always withstand. And we're watching people fail that test in real time. They're choosing their own freedom, their own futures over loyalty to Trump. And honestly, you can't really blame them. These people are facing the very real prospect of spending years in federal prison. They're looking at their careers being destroyed, their families being torn apart, their entire lives being upended. And they're thinking, why should I sacrifice everything for someone else's decisions? That's human nature. That's the way people behave when they're backed into a corner. And Trump, for all his bluster about loyalty, is discovering that it has limits. Now, let's get into the legal conflicts that are making this case even messier. In October of 2023, there was a hearing where Judge Cannon had to deal with a truly awkward situation. Trump's attorney, Stanley Woodward, might have to cross-examine his own former client, Tavares, on the witness stand. Think about the awkwardness of that scenario. A lawyer who used to represent a witness now having to question that same witness in front of a jury, asking him about things they discussed when they were on the same side, trying to poke holes in his testimony, even though they used to share confidential information. That's not just a professional conflict. That's a personal betrayal. And it creates enormous tension within the defense team. Lawyers who were once working together now find themselves in an adversarial position. Clients who thought they could trust their attorneys now have to wonder if those same attorneys will eventually be cross-examining them. It's a mess, a complete mess. And it's exactly the kind of thing that makes it harder for Trump to mount an effective defense. But the implications go beyond just the legal case. This also has significant political consequences for Trump, because every time a witness flips, every time someone in his orbit starts cooperating with prosecutors, it sends a powerful message to everyone else around him. It tells them that cooperation is an option, that they don't have to go down with the ship, that they can negotiate deals that protect them from prosecution if they're willing to provide useful information. And that creates a corrosive atmosphere of paranoia and distrust within Trump's inner circle. People start looking over their shoulders. They start wondering who's next to flip. They start asking themselves whether they should start talking to their own lawyers about potential cooperation deals. This is the opposite of the kind of environment you need for effective governance. It's hard to run a country when you can't trust the people around you. It's hard to make decisions about national security when you're constantly worried about who might be recording your conversations or saving your emails. And this is exactly what Trump is dealing with right now. Not just legal jeopardy, but the erosion of trust that makes it nearly impossible to govern effectively. Now, let's step back and look at the broader pattern here. This isn't the first time we've seen Trump's inner circle facing legal pressure. Remember the whole Ukraine saga back in 2019? National security professionals testified that Trump withheld military aid from Ukraine to pressure the Ukrainian government to investigate Joe Biden and his son. That was also about loyalty. That was also about Trump using his power to demand personal favors. And people in his administration pushed back. They testified against him. They cooperated with investigators. The same pattern, the same dynamic. Trump expects absolute loyalty. He expects people to break rules and push boundaries for him. And when they refuse, when they decide to tell the truth instead of protecting him, he attacks them. He calls them traitors. He accuses them of being part of some deep state conspiracy. It's a predictable pattern that plays out again and again. And now we're seeing it play out with the classified documents case. Witnesses flipping, people cooperating, the whole thing unfolding exactly as it has in previous controversies. And then there's the comparison to Hillary Clinton's email situation. Because, that's what people are going to bring up. Back when Clinton was Secretary of State, she used a private email server for government business. Some of those emails contained classified information. Republicans went absolutely ballistic. They held endless hearings. They demanded prosecutions. Trump himself led the charge, saying she should be in jail. Lock her up, remember? That was his rallying cry. That was his promise to his supporters. But now, when Trump is accused of mishandling classified documents, many more documents than Clinton ever dealt with, suddenly, it's all a witch hunt. Suddenly, it's political persecution. Suddenly, the rules don't apply. The hypocrisy is breathtaking. But it's also revealing, because it shows that Trump and his supporters don't actually care about the law, they care about power. They care about using the legal system to attack their opponents while protecting themselves from the same scrutiny. And that's a dangerous double standard that undermines the rule of law. Let's think about what it means for a sitting president to be dealing with this kind of legal pressure. Trump is supposed to be focused on governing. He's supposed to be making decisions about the economy, about foreign policy, about national security. He's supposed to be working with Congress to pass legislation and implement his agenda. But how can he do any of that effectively when his attention is constantly being pulled away by legal battles? When he has to spend hours with his lawyers reviewing evidence and preparing for potential trials? When every new witness flip dominates the news cycle and creates political chaos? That's not a president who can focus on the country's needs. That's a president who's fighting for his own political survival. And that reality has real consequences for the American people. Because when the president is distracted, when he's consumed by his own legal problems, he can't give the job the attention it deserves. Major decisions get delayed or mishandled. Crises don't get the response they require. The government doesn't function as effectively as it should. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. A presidency that's being hollowed out by legal battles that should have been resolved before Trump took office again. But they weren't resolved. They've just been hanging around, getting worse, creating more and more chaos. And the political implications are enormous, because Trump dominates the Republican Party. He controls the party's message. He shapes its priorities. He determines who gets support and who gets sidelined. And when Trump is dealing with serious legal troubles, that becomes the party's problem too. Every Republican politician has to answer questions about whether they support Trump, whether they believe the charges against him, whether they think he should step down if he's convicted. That creates divisions within the party. Some Republicans stick with Trump no matter what. They repeat his claims about witch hunts and political persecution. They attack the prosecutors and the judges and the witnesses. They try to delegitimize the entire legal process. But other Republicans are more cautious. They start to distance themselves from Trump, at least publicly. They try to avoid talking about the case. They pivot to other issues. They hope it will all go away. And then there are those who try to play both sides, offering lukewarm support for Trump while also suggesting that they believe in the rule of law. It's a difficult balancing act that creates enormous tension within the party. And that tension makes it harder to accomplish anything legislatively. Because when Republicans are divided among themselves, when they can't agree on basic principles, they can't pass laws. They can't advance their agenda. They can't govern effectively. Democrats, meanwhile, are using all of this as political ammunition. They point to Trump's legal troubles as evidence that he's unfit for office. They talk about impeachment and removal. They push for investigations. They try to use this issue to win elections. And they've got plenty of material to work with, because the evidence in this case is overwhelming. The witnesses are credible, the documents are damning, and Trump's own behavior, attacking the justice system, attacking witnesses, trying to obstruct the investigation, only makes things worse. So for Democrats, this is a gift that keeps on giving. Every time a witness flips, every time new evidence emerges, every time Trump says something damaging on social media, it reinforces their narrative that he's corrupt and dangerous. And that narrative is resonating with voters. Polls show that Americans are paying attention to these legal battles. They're forming opinions about Trump's conduct. And while his base remains loyal, other voters, independents and moderate Republicans, are starting to have doubts. They're starting to wonder if there's some truth to these accusations. And that's a dangerous trend for Trump's political future. Now, let's talk about what happens next. Because this case is still in pretrial mode. which means we're potentially looking at a trial of a sitting president. That has never happened before in American history. Never. Not once. And it would be an absolute spectacle. Think about the logistics. Witnesses testifying about what Trump did. Prosecutors presenting all that evidence, all 833,000 pages of it. Defense attorneys trying to poke holes in the government's case. And Trump himself potentially having to take the stand. That would be unprecedented. It would dominate media coverage for months. It would overshadow everything else in Washington. It would paralyze the government. And we don't know how it ends. Maybe Trump gets convicted and has to face the consequences. Maybe he gets acquitted and claims total vindication. Maybe there's a hung jury and they have to retry the whole thing. Any of those outcomes would have massive political ramifications. A conviction would almost certainly lead to calls for Trump to resign or be removed from office. An acquittal would be a huge victory for Trump that would energize his base. A hung jury would create chaos and uncertainty. So we're looking at a political earthquake either way. And the timing matters too. This is all happening as Trump is trying to push through his second-term agenda. He's trying to build momentum for his policy goals. He's trying to position himself and his party for the midterm elections. But this legal drama keeps getting in the way. Every time he tries to focus on his agenda, something happens. A witness flips. A new piece of evidence emerges. A judge makes a ruling. And the news cycle shifts back to his legal troubles. That's not an environment where you can build political momentum. That's an environment where you're constantly on the defensive. And that defensive posture makes it very hard to accomplish anything meaningful. The domino effect of all these flipping witnesses is something that Trump's inner circle is feeling acutely. Because once one person decides to cooperate, it creates a chain reaction. Others start to worry that they'll be left holding the bag. Others start thinking about whether they should start talking to prosecutors before it's too late. Others start wondering if the people they trusted are already talking to the government behind their backs. It's an atmosphere of suspicion and paranoia that makes it nearly impossible to build trust. And without trust, you can't build a cohesive team. Without trust, you can't run an effective administration. This is the slow erosion of Trump's power base, and it's happening one witness at a time, one document at a time, one deal with prosecutors at a time. The walls are closing in from all directions, and every new cooperation agreement makes them that much tighter. So what does this all mean for the future? It means Trump is going to keep fighting. That's what he does. He never backs down. He never admits defeat. He never takes responsibility for anything. He attacks his enemies. He claims everything is a witch hunt. He tries to distract with other controversies. He keeps his base energized. But the question is whether that strategy can work when the people around him keep turning on him. How long can he maintain his grip on power when the foundation of loyalty is cracking? How long can he keep fighting when every witness who flips makes the next witness more likely to do the same? We don't know the answer to that question. We're in uncharted territory, a president who's fighting multiple legal battles while trying to govern. Trump's inner circle is hollowing out as more witnesses cooperate, the party fractures, and new evidence emerges. The coming historic drama is just beginning.